Hi, and welcome to this short screencast for week 4, and we are in Curriculum Methods and Techniques, ECE 220. So our objectives for this screencast are the following: to identify the characteristics of developmentally and culturally appropriate learning experiences from children birth to 8 years, distinguish credible sources of developmentally appropriate materials, activities, physical arrangements, and experiences that promote child development and learning for all children regardless of ability, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, language, and culture, identify developmentally appropriate child outcomes, and select developmentally appropriate activities that promote identified child learning outcomes. So this week we are talking about physical development and we are talking about sensory development, and we're really going to talk about how the two work with each other and go hand in hand and why they're important in early childhood classrooms. So physical development, sometimes referred to as motor development, actually begins at birth. And really what you're looking for when you're looking at physical development is there is a predictable, orderly sequence that goes along with how young children develop physical skills and motor skills, but it's really important to note that all new movements build upon prior movements. So if you think about an infant, physical development begins at their head and then moves to their lower body. And really this is dependent upon the brain and nerve development, so it's depending upon what's going on in the head, in the brain, and we know that because of that, that's why movement that is closer to the head and the spine are going to develop first. As I've stated, there is a basic orderly pattern to how physical development occurs, and it's called the motor sequence. And this should be note that this is for a child who is typically developing, but we know that all children develop on their own timetable, and it's really important that you are responsive to that. However, if you look at this infograph over to the side, you can kind of see the neurodevelopmental sequence of how motor skills develop, and it's pretty typical. You might have an infant who skips some of these things, but for the most part, this is the way the development occurs. Additionally, when we're talking about physical development, what we're really looking at is two types of development or skill sets. We're talking about fine motor and gross motor. So fine motor is the control of the small muscles in the hands or the fingers, and gross motor involves the control of any large muscles that our bodies use. So an example of a fine motor activity would be painting, writing, coloring, stringing beads, maybe even building a puzzle. Examples of gross motor activities would include hopping, running, jumping, skipping, hula hooping, anything that is involving large muscles of the body. Additionally, there are two other things that should be noted in terms of physical development, and the first one is spatial awareness. So spatial awareness is the ability to be aware of oneself in space, and this actually develops through sensory motor play, but is also reinforced through language. So when we think about how we reinforce this through language, it's through things like up, down, over, under, left, right, when we are talking about physical space and how your body moves in physical space. This also involves perceptual development, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and the motor systems working together. So perceptual development is actually how young children process sensory information through experiences and interactions with objects and people in their environment. We know that there are some senses that are developed at birth that include taste, hearing, and smell, and we also know that infants have the ability to process more than one sensory input at a time. Sometimes perceptual development can also be called sensory motor integration. And understanding this is extremely important because sensory development is tied to perceptual development and spatial awareness. And really, this is how we learn. It's our primary mode for gathering information and processing information. We learn through our 5 senses. So think about, even in terms of yourself, how important your 5 senses are to you in the world. In traditional classroom environment, we would do an activity regarding a lemon, which is just showcasing the importance of hands-on learning experiences for young children. So how does all this relate? Physical development, sensory development, perceptual development, and spatial awareness, and why is this important? I kind of have already alluded to it, but this is how we learn, and this is how young children learn. Young children learn from the hand to the head, and so hands-on learning opportunities are extremely important. And these hands-on learning opportunities are learning through your senses. And when you're learning through your senses, you are promoting spatial awareness, and you're promoting physical development, like fine motor and gross motor skills. I think that this is why this is the first chapter in the book, because without these skills developing, you're going to have a harder time with more cognitive development skills. So that's when we're talking about math and reading and science. You kind of need to have firmly developed physical development skills in order to really move on to some higher order thinking. So this is the first chapters and the first things that we start talking about in terms of curriculum development. And you'll have the opportunity to include this information in some of your learning experience plans this semester. So again, reach out if you have any questions, and that is all.